Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev, and finally back after another week of vacation. In this episode, I've got some pretty cool topics that we should explore. We have a major new FlashList version, we have a lot of updates and things I saw between the tweets and lines of people from Expo and the React Native community, things that are already happening that you can use probably in a couple of weeks, and things that are on the horizon. Plus, a little update on the whole web versus in-app drama that occurred a couple of weeks or month ago. So, a lot of interesting topics to cover. If you watch this video on YouTube, you might notice my kind of strange t-shirt. By the way, if you're listening to this, you should probably also subscribe on YouTube. It's from Sentry because I really like Sentry and they sent me this. It's probably not the kind of swag I would usually wear out on the streets, but I think maybe for the video it's okay. It says Bug Slayer and there's a giant bug in case you're listening and not watching, but it's definitely worth to take a look at this on YouTube. Anyway, let's get into the news. So, the first thing I already hinted at is FlashList version 2 was released. We talked about this a couple of times already over the last episodes when there were beta versions. Now it's released, and they have a great post explaining exactly the shortcomings of FlashList version 1 and what's better in FlashList version 2. To sum it up, the announcement said no more size estimates needed, which is a great thing. They have an improved masonry layout for beautiful grids, and they have a chat ready or chat support, I would say, with a prop called maintain visible content position. So I always like to read these tweets because people usually put the most important stuff into the tweets. But the whole write-up on the Shopify engineering blog is great as well. It dives deep into the problems of FlashList version 1. You know, you always had to give it an estimated item size, which made it kind of hard. It had a lot of native dependency. It wouldn't work with Expo Go, which is, a minor thing, but still one. It had some precision issues, and if you remember when I talked to Aaron Bereskin in the past about the Bible application they built, they also had a lot of problems scrolling to specific sections because the Bible is quite long. And these kind of problems are now all gone with FlashList version 2. Because estimating the item size is now a lot easier. In the old architecture, you had the async bridge, so you had to call the measure function, you would get the measurements from the native thread, and you would get this back in an async way, and now you can just directly ask the JS thread about the measurements, the layout sizes, and it will immediately give you the results back synchronously, not even asynchronously. And that already enables a lot of the great things that are now possible. So, thank the new architecture for this package. On top of that, as I said, they removed some precision problems. You can scroll absolutely precisely now to an object. They improved horizontal list as well. You can also have a horizontal list in a vertical list, and the vertical list will respect the horizontal list, so wait until that is finished so you get the right measurements. We have better support for web. We have advanced scroll position maintenance, which is what they claim to be helpful for chat interfaces. So if you think about a chat, if you think about new messages coming in, you can set the maintain visible content position prop, which is enabled by default, and it will just do that. It will maintain the visible content position. Okay, on top, the masonry is pretty cool. I honestly haven't seen this too many times since quitting Pinterest, but maybe it's still cool for some applications. And overall, this is a pretty big step forward. I know Legend List is out, and Legend List is a great solution as well. I really wonder which of those two lists is now the best, and in which case FlashList is better, or which case Legend List is better. I'm still waiting for the experts to talk about this because I'm not exactly sure how I would measure this, how I would come up with like an example repository in which we could check this. But anyway, if you like FlashList, if you've used version 1, I would definitely tell you to upgrade to version 2 now. This will definitely give your app a big bump forward. That's first of all for the big news. Then, Callstack released some interesting packages lately. They have, first of all, a new Shimmer component. So a Shimmer component is it's also known as a skeleton component, which is usually better than just having an activity indicator, because nobody likes activity indicators anymore. If you open up the Instagram or the YouTube application, you usually see a shimmer, which is pretty much like a placeholder of how the UI looks like in gray, and it shimmers with a little gradient. And it is something that helps your app to improve the perceived performance. It's not actually like it's displayed for a second and an activity indicator would be displayed for a second as well. There's no difference. But the perceived performance is better from a user perspective. So you should really favor a loading shimmer or a skeleton view. And this new one from Callstack looks really amazing. It looks like a perfect drop-in solution. It is really performant. I guess it's using the new architecture as well under the hood. If it is using this, if it needs this, I don't know. But the usage is really easy. It is super light to use. I guess this might become my favorite or default React Native loading shimmer in the past. So I hope I already gave it a star. No, I didn't. So now I did it because some people called me out on not starring repositories. Now I did that. They also, and with they I mean Callstack, released something interesting. They introduced Rozenite, a plugin framework for React Native DevTools. So first of all, why is it called Rozenite? I would really love to know. If anyone from Callstack Shimmer who created this or authored this post is listening to this, why is it called Rozenite? Where is that name coming from? It's not a bad name in itself, but it's untypical for the things in the dev world. I don't know. Maybe it has a meaning. It is pretty cool. there are some previews of how this React Native DevTool looks. It integrates into the default React Native DevTools. You know, if you press, I don't know, Command-Shift-I or something, or you just have to press J when running the Expo CLI, right? And it opens up the React Native DevTools, and in there you can have now more tabs defined by this Rozenite plugin. I have questions about this because I haven't used it really yet. I wonder in how far it's different from the Expo DevTools that you can also do, because they also look quite the same. It, by the way, it works. It has support for Expo and the React Native CLI. So we'll have to see. The interesting thing here is usually that whatever Callstack produces, puts out, it's mostly meant for bigger teams. They also say this: Rozenite was built with one mission, to empower teams working on complex React Native apps. And it's a core theme for most of the things that these bigger consulting agencies release. Therefore, I don't know in how far it will help me specifically, or like the tiny hackers, the indie hackers, the 1-2 person teams using React Native. But it's interesting to see improvements in the realm of DevTools, because we all know DevTools haven't been too great with React Native in the past. So every step forward is cool, and I will definitely give this a try. Now let's talk about other modules. I noticed that one specific user, he or she is called Ritesh. Could also be she. It has like a, no, it's he, him. Has like a manga image here. So there are a couple of repositories new under this GitHub account and also promoted on X. So one, for example, is an Expo animated toast. I really like that one. I'm going to start this now, because the default toast or the other toast libraries are sometimes a bit hard to use. And I think this one's quite easy. I don't know why my toast preview here in the browser isn't working. But most of the toasts I've seen were not too great, and this one looks actually really, really sleek. Then there's an Expo iOS Popover tip. Why haven't I gave these? I'm pretty sure I gave all these repositories a star already. Where the stars gone? Anyway, the Popover tip, it's, I don't know, you would probably use it, yeah, like a tooltip component. There are many of these little libraries. Expo Liquid Glass View is another one, so you expose the liquid glass views for Expo. All of these things are powered by Expo modules, so it looks like Ritesh really likes to use Expo modules and make this public. I think this is great, because most of these packages really solve a specific thing. Like, you want liquid glass, use this. You want a toast, use this. They're not trying to do 10 different things at once, and you can include them when needed in your application. So give these repositories a star. They're already rising in popularity, and I think this user really deserves some kudos. Then let's get to more new packages. So ElevenLabs released a React Native SDK. If you don't know what ElevenLabs is, they're pretty much, what do they claim? I work with them together. They make kind of like conversational APIs for audio stuff, anything with AI generated. For example, I also cloned my voice with ElevenLabs. I just gave it like 10 minutes of this podcast and it perfectly cloned my voice. And you can use their APIs. They have a WebRTC include now and first class Expo support with their new SDK. Thor also made a couple of interesting examples already in the past. He sometimes used Expo DOM components, but I guess at this point you can now use this simply, the whole AI SDK in your app without that stuff. It's pretty cool. ElevenLabs is definitely one of the best providers in that realm. So if you're looking for anything related to audio and AI, give ElevenLabs a try. And their React Native SDK just makes things a whole lot easier at this point. Speaking of AI, there's also a new version of the AI SDK. So the AI SDK was built by Vercel. I think in the beginning, it was kind of like a little wrapper for some AI functionality. And we all thought, yeah, Vercel is just doing its thing. But they have evolved this package. And this package has become so popular that the AI SDK is now sort of the standard for using many of the AI functionalities as a JavaScript or TypeScript developer. And they're constantly pushing out great updates to make the AI SDK even easier. So now they have type-safe chat, agentic loop controls, data parts, speech generation and transcription, ZOT4 support, global provider, and raw request access. I probably understand 10% of what I just read. But I've used it in some of my applications, and I also did a video about this in the past. And it's just unbelievable, cool and easy how it works. They even have documentation for how to make this work with Expo router and API routes, how to like include this. This is pretty cool. And again, the AI SDK feels like it has become the de facto standard for using AI tools and all these things in TypeScript applications. So if you're building anything with it right now, give it a try. Check out the AI SDK. On top of that, more news. Expo has a cool new or updated documentation on using Patch-Project. Now, this might be not really newsworthy, but I still wanted to include it because in the past, I always encountered these situations where I had to patch something in my project. It might sometimes be a node module, or it might also be something inside one of my native folders. And with Patch-Project, what you can do is you can now include this more seamlessly in your Expo project, in your Expo CLI. You install the package, you include it as a plugin in your app.json, and then you can run it, and it generates these CNG patches. So continuous native generation, the term Expo uses to generate or update your native projects when doing a dev build. And they will patch your iOS or your Android application. And it's pretty cool because if there's something, usually CNG will clean or remove your iOS and Android folder, and you shouldn't really treat them as an artifact. Most of that stuff is done by the app.json, by the Expo plugins, and everything you define in your app.json. But with this, it becomes easier, or it is easier to share things you want to patch in a native project with your teammates, because if they otherwise install a project, they won't have the patches. And if you just now use the CNG patches or the Patch-Project command, you can share these files and your colleagues can simply patch their projects as well. That's a lot of patching. Again, probably not the biggest news, but I think it's interesting and important that you've heard about it at least once. Now, coming back to one of my favorite Twitter users, Evan Bacon. Evan Bacon's profile is always a great source for new information. So what did Evan tweet over the last 2 weeks? I just picked out like 2 or 3 tweets. First of all, long press context menu items coming in the next version of Expo Router. This is interesting. So Elon Musk posted something with long press image on X, and Evan retweeted this. It's interesting because usually there was a package from Fernando Rojo, the Zigo menus, I guess. Yeah, I think it was Zigo. for getting these context menus. Looks like Expo is integrating a great library or great functionality into their SDK. I definitely love it. Zigo was cool and great to use, but if it becomes even easier with Expo Router, I'm definitely down for it. Then, probably even bigger news. Evan asked something regarding Apple SF, color classes and icons. Nothing too important, but he then also later retweeted, also, we've been working on native CSS parsing plus pure Tailwind version 4 support in Expo for all platforms. More info coming soon. This is pretty big, honestly, because if we have native CSS parsing in our Expo application, and if you continue to read the answers he gives, it looks like they will have a subset of CSS functionality available that you can use in your app. And that means you don't have to go through the whole setup of native Wind in your application and might be able to use CSS or Tailwind functionality directly in your Expo React Native application. He also continues to say there will be an early version available in Expo SDK 54. And as far as I know, that one should be released at the end of August, which only gives us a couple more weeks. So this has to be in an advanced state already. He also said, yeah, we're working with the creator of Native Wind, Mark Lawler. So Mark Lawler, as far as I know, is still working for Expo, I guess, at least. Native Wind will still add some extra tools and guides around Tailwind plus Expo, but the core CSS parsing is being stabilized and added to Expo. I think this has been a long time coming since Native Wind came up and then Mark Lawler joined Expo. They always said they kind of wanted to bring in or make Tailwind or Native Wind the default styling for Expo applications. I think it's a good idea to not make it the default because some people still don't like Tailwind or Native Wind, but I guess it looks like they're now bringing in the core functionality that enables Native Wind into Expo, which is interesting to see. I'm definitely down to this, and we'll see what happens to CSS with Expo SDK 54. Then, there's a new example, or this user Ed shared. Next version of React Native screen transitions will have two new transitions for Instagram and Twitter UI, which is basically this whole sort of, you click an image and it expands to full, and then you can like drag it down and it decreases in size and goes back into position. Something you've probably seen in many applications today. You can do this also in YouTube, you can do this in Instagram, and you can also do this in X. The React Native screen transitions package is pretty epic. I wonder how much of this will be available straight through Expo Router. I don't know exactly, but this looks definitely interesting, and it's so cool to see that this is the sort of stuff that like 5 years ago I would make a tutorial on how to build the Instagram close animation, and we would do tons of reanimated stuff, or when I did this in Ionic and Capacitor, it was so hard. You calculate stuff with CSS and positioning, and now we just get people to create these packages and you can use that for free. Just stop for a second and think about this. Someone on the internet you've never met creates this awesome package and you can just use it for free. That person will never know about you and you will probably never meet that person, but he has done a great service to you. This is incredible. I love the React Native ecosystem, honestly. Okay, two more little looks or outlooks into the future. One thing is from Evan Bacon. So I love to read his answers, especially because that's where he sometimes drops these little nuggets of what's happening. This one is not about something that's happening, but more questioning the React Native CLI. I've always been interested in this because, you know, I'm a big fan of Expo. I've always used Expo and the Expo CLI. I recommend it, and it is the recommended way for React Native. I understand that many companies have legacy applications still on the React Native CLI, but there are also some people still claiming that, I don't know, Expo is not giving you XYZ, and therefore you should use the React Native CLI. Evan clarifies this in one answer here where a user asks, will this be backported into plain React Native? And he says, Expo is the default way to use React Native. The community CLI has fallen so far behind Expo CLI. No Metro Web, React Server components, tree shaking, API routes, envvars, tsconfig alias, bundle splitting, DOM component. It seems wild to me that anyone is still using it. And seeing all of that lined up here kind of makes it to me, like, I come to the same conclusion. It's wild to me that anyone is still using it. You're missing out on so many things, so many advancements that are now built into the Expo CLI, that starting a new project with a React Native CLI, it's like, I don't know, why? I will talk about this with an upcoming guest in the probably next or following episode, because I also don't know, and he's probably also a big fan of Expo CLI. So again, if you have a legacy project, okay, I can understand it. If possible, still try to migrate it. But for anything new, please just use Expo. And also for anything new, and as a final news, I want to share that in the React Native repository, a PR was merged, and that one was called remove possibility to new arc enabled equals false in 0.82. So Nicola finally said it's now time to say goodbye to the legacy architecture, which was previously called the old architecture. This change hard codes the new arc enabled property to true and warns the user if they're attempting to set it to false. That means the new architecture has for a couple of versions been the default, and this is now like making that change even clearer. So for everyone still on the old architecture, please try to migrate your applications to a recent React Native version and use the new architecture. There will be some issues. It is not always easy for every application, but most packages at this point should be ready. There's also the compatibility layer, so you should be able to make it work, and your app usually benefits a lot from the new architecture. So ending the updates with this, quite some updates today, but I think I wanted to really take the time to explain everything that has been going on over the last 1 or 2 weeks since I've been absent. So now you're at the perfect level of information about the React Native ecosystem again. Because I've been mostly on vacation, I don't really have any personal updates, tiny wins, or other built-in public news for you, only that I'm really happy about all the vacations I was able to take this summer, and I will definitely be back in full steam very, very soon. There's just 1 more week with my daughter and grandparents, but after that I'll be mostly back, and so at the end of August and September, when the new Expo SDK drops, I will be fully back. Now, to wrap it up for today, a couple of trending technology topics. First, a little addition. So last week, or the week before in the last episode, I told you that Evan had now also pinned to his profile a Claude MD file he's using for Expo app, and that I was personally interested in Claude Code because everyone's been talking about this. Additionally, what I wanted to say is that he also said, again, in the comments, I found this, I'm very protective of the context window and avoid streaming logs to it, working on a tool for this in Expo. I always love seeing this line because that means they're tinkering on something cool. And this one is related to AI or Claude Code. I'm definitely looking forward to whatever they're cooking. He also just recently said something about where Claude Code shared they can now handle long-running tasks in the background. This is huge. Expo CLI already exposes so much context via CLI. Now the agent can automatically read it without needing an additional MCP layer. If you don't understand all that AI talk, it basically means if you tell Claude Code to run your Expo application, it will be able to stream and read the logs the whole time. Then you can just ask questions to Claude Code about things that are going wrong. If there's any error in this in the logs, you can just ask about this. This is really big, and I'm looking forward to whatever Expo or Evan Bacon is cooking regarding to AI, because it is here to stay. We're all using it in different sort of ways, some more, some less. And if there's any integration, as we've also seen before, Infinite Red had this MCP layer that connected to your iOS simulator, and it could just like do things and see the UI. It's so cool. I'm definitely looking forward to this. Speaking of Infinite Red, I had a little take from Jamin as well. Sebastian from This Week in React shared a nice little graphic that shared that Poland has actually more Flutter developers than React Native, and Germany has by far more Flutter developers than React Native. I'm sorry, yeah, Germany, what's going on here? Anyway, what Jamin said is, takeaway here is Flutter is really popular in countries that primarily use Android. He summed it up to the whole iOS and Android market share, and you can kind of match this one-to-one to the graphics. So Germany has like 65% Android usage, Poland has 74% Android usage, and it usually results in more developers being Flutter developers than React Native developers. Now, on top of this comes also that some major companies use Flutter. For example, in Germany, it's BMW, which is one of the big car manufacturers in Germany. I don't know if that's totally responsible for the big Flutter community in Germany, but it definitely has an impact on all these stats. So once again, take all these statistics that people share on X with a grain of salt, especially if they claim Flutter is the future because XYZ, more people use it or anything. Always be careful with these kind of statistics. Sometimes the numbers are off. You can just pick 10 countries where Flutter is most dominant and say, okay, Flutter is most dominant everywhere. We pick these 10 countries and you see it's best. It's hard, and I think I've said this before, Flutter is actually falling behind in my eyes, given that they won't implement liquid glass and the whole new paradigm that iOS apps will have, while React Native is just blazing forward with new things, AI functionality, Expo modules, and other things regarding that matter. Now, finally, one trending topic. Couple of weeks ago, I told you that Apple lost this lawsuit against, I think it's Epic Games, right? The creator of Fortnite. And in the United States, they now have to accept that you can make a purchase in an application outside the traditional in-app purchases. So you're now allowed to have a web checkout for purchases in your iOS application. RevenueCat jumped into this immediately, helped us to build new pages, hosted pages for a web checkout, and they also now ran an experiment for in-app purchases versus web checkout, and the results are interesting. TLDR, basically, web subscription result in 6% drop in take-home revenue. Not a big number, but it is something. If you read through the whole post and how they did it, it's quite interesting. You can see how they converted the users and the exact numbers. But basically, this confirms the assumption that I had. I had it from a different point of perspective. I thought Apple would do something after they lost this this lawsuit to make this web checkout somehow damage your application. I don't know. I assume they would downrate your app on the App Store or do anything behind the scenes that will make your app less attractive. Looks like they don't even have to do that because users really don't want that web checkout. Users on iOS are used to the native checkout. You got this, start my trial or whatever that button is, they hit it, they know what it does, they know they can manage it in their iPhone settings somewhere. But with a web checkout, they have an additional step. They have to click that button, they go to the web, they're outside of the comfort zone they're used to, and therefore the conversion simply drops. It looks a bit like the people you convert on the web might stay longer, so their lifetime value might be higher. But overall, the take-home money is simply less from this web checkout versus this is just native checkout. So Apple doesn't even have to do anything about the whole checkout drama because it looks like people just vote with their money and they're saying, hey, we trust what we've been using for the last 15 years. The iOS in-app purchase flow is what I like, what I want to use, and therefore, yeah, it looks to me like I won't spend too much time implementing the web checkout. It might make sense for companies like Epic that will otherwise lose some money, but even for them, if the stats hold up, I don't know if there's a reason for them to actually do this in the future. We will see. It's interesting to see this. And I hope this gave you an update on everything, not just the packages related to React Native Radar, but also to the AI topics and everything else going on in the React Native world. Once again, the next week might be an episode or not, I'm not exactly sure. I'm looking forward to record with a special guest. So once again, we will have a guest episode here on the podcast. You can definitely be excited about that one. I'm too, and I will hopefully catch you in one of the next episodes. Until then, build some epic apps and happy coding, Simon. Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.